Shalom, this is Rabbi Dov Linzer of Yeshivat Chovei Torah Rabbinical School, and I wanted to share with you a thought on this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha is Bereishit, the very beginning of the Torah. And after all of the stories and the narratives, at the end of Bereishit, the Torah says, Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam, Bidmut Elohim Asaoto. This is the story of the generations of Adam, the person Adam, of the human generations. In the image of God, God made him. The human beings are created in the image of God, reminding us of the story of how the first man was created. Now, this pasuk is critical because there's a passage in the Talmud where Rabbi Akiva says that the biggest mitzvah of the Torah, the klal gadol b'Torah, is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. And we all sort of embrace that pasuk as central to our understanding of what the Torah is commanding us. But Ben Azai says, in the Midrash Halacha, Ben Azai says, no. Bidmut Elohim asa oto, zeh sefer toldot adam, zeh klal gadol mizeh. That is a more important pasuk than ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So what does he mean? Why is that more important? It doesn't have the word love, it's not commanding us, but there's one level where that's clear. This is, if all human beings are created in the image of God, it's not limited to re'echa. It's not limited to your neighbor, to somebody who's close to you. The rabbis read re'echa as your fellow Jew, that the mitzvah of ahavta does not apply to non-Jews. Ben Azai is saying every human being is created in the image of God. No difference if it's re'echa or not re'echa. There's another way in which this is different. Because v'ahavta l're'echa kamocha, the use of the word re'echa and kamocha, your friend like you, suggests a degree of reciprocity. And it suggests that part of the central theme of this mitzvah is the fact that I love you, you love me. That creates a healthy society. If I act in certain ways, then it is reciprocated, and society is a better society because we appreciate everything that we gain and we make sure that we give back. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Ben Azai is saying it has nothing to do with reciprocity. It starts by being anchored in the fact that every human being is created in the image of God, and that means we must give every human being respect and dignity and full treatment, full ways of acting towards that person, man or woman, with an understanding that they are an expression of the divine. Now, I think that this is critically important in terms of some of the issues that we're dealing with nowadays, because the issue of racism has once again come to the surface, and it's always been with us sort of in deep ways, even when it's only below the surface, and it's really risen to the surface. And there are other ways in which we deal with this question of, are we doing the mitzvah of ahavta l'reacha kamocha? There's the issue of how we treat the LGBT community, how we treat people with disabilities. And I would argue that the reason we have not been good about this is because of that aspect of reacha kamocha, because of that aspect of reciprocity. If in our minds the reason we give respect to somebody else is because of how that plays back and forth, and we do it for them and they do it for us, then it's not going to work so well if we are in a privileged position, a position of power, because there's not so much reciprocity. And why do I have to care how I treat you if you're not in a position to treat me in the same way back? So there's nothing that's pulling us, that's demanding us to act that way. But if we started from the pasuk of Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam, Bidmut Elohim Asaoto, that every human being is created in the image of God, then it would have nothing to do with who has privilege, who has power. If I can appreciate the divine within you, then that is infinitely more important than who I am and what my power, what my privilege is. And I have to respond appropriately to that. I have to act appropriately. And it's not just ahava, it's dignity, it's accessibility, it's inclusion, it's all the ways in which I respond properly to the fact that you are an expression of the image of God. So for us, I think in all the time, and particularly in terms of the issues that we're dealing with right now, while v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is critical because it forms a strong bond within a sense of a community, because it dictates a very specific act of behavior, we have to remember Ben Azai that Zeh Sefer Toldot Adam has ways in which it's more expansive to all humankind, and to focusing and recognizing that forget reciprocity, there is human dignity. We have to respond to that, whether it is for people of color, whether it's for people with disabilities, whether it's for the LGBT community, anybody who we have not done well in terms of society with the respect and dignity we show them, we have to remember that every human being is created in the image of God and act appropriately. Shabbat Shalom.